In this episode, we're going to take the pressure and momentum of corporate change and translate it into calm, deliberate privacy management. When organizations merge, acquire, partner, or separate, the business usually focuses on speed, continuity, and value, while privacy focuses on promises, obligations, and preventing harm. Those goals are not enemies, but they can collide when data begins moving faster than controls can follow. The practical skill you need is aligning risks and controls across parties so that everyone understands what is permitted, what is protected, and what evidence exists to prove it. That alignment work has to happen during integration planning and during separation planning, because both situations create new pathways for personal data to be accessed, copied, reused, and retained. If you can guide that alignment early, you reduce the chance of accidental misuse, you reduce the chance of silent oversharing, and you make the whole change event easier to defend later. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at CIPM in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. When people hear alignment, they sometimes picture a meeting where everyone nods and agrees, but the kind of alignment that matters in privacy is operational. Operational alignment means the parties share the same definitions, follow the same boundaries, and implement controls that behave consistently across systems and teams. Without that consistency, you end up with a situation where one party believes deletion is happening while the other keeps backups indefinitely, or one party believes access is limited while the other grants broad internal visibility for convenience. This is where risk grows, because the gaps between assumptions become the places where incidents occur. The simplest way to understand this is to treat integration or separation as a moment of change to the data lifecycle. Anytime the lifecycle changes, you should expect new risk, and you should expect existing controls to become weaker until they are rebuilt for the new shape of the organization. A strong alignment approach begins by treating each party as a full environment with its own data, systems, people, vendors, and habits. Even if two organizations look similar on the surface, the details that matter to privacy often differ, such as retention culture, access discipline, or how support teams handle production data. One party may have centralized governance, while the other relies on local decisions by product teams. One may have formal review gates for new data use, while the other treats analytics as a default. When you align risks and controls, you are not only comparing policies, you are comparing how work actually happens. The reason this matters is that integration increases the number of connections between systems, and each connection is a new opportunity for data to be duplicated or exposed. Separation creates the opposite problem. Controls that used to rely on internal trust must become controls that work across a boundary, because the boundary is now real. It helps to keep a clear difference in your mind between integration planning and separation planning, because they can happen at the same time in complex corporate events. Integration planning is about building safe pathways for approved sharing, approved access, and approved processing, so the combined organization can operate without breaking commitments. Separation planning is about removing pathways, tightening boundaries, and preventing continued access once the business relationship changes shape. Integration tends to create risk through expansion, while separation tends to create risk through leftovers, like accounts that remain active, shared vendor dashboards that still show data, and databases that still contain records for the divested unit. Both require a control mindset that is proactive rather than reactive. Privacy management succeeds here by making data movement intentional, not accidental, and by ensuring the controls that govern that movement are understood by both sides. A practical way to start alignment is to create a shared risk vocabulary, because teams cannot control what they cannot describe in the same language. You want the parties to agree on what personal data means in their context, what sensitive categories exist, and what constitutes a privacy incident. You also want clarity on roles and responsibilities, because mixed assumptions about who owns an obligation is a major failure mode in corporate change. If a customer asks for deletion, which party executes it, which party confirms it, and which party documents it? If an incident occurs in a shared system, who investigates, who decides whether notification is required, and who communicates with the affected individuals. When those questions remain unclear, people make guesses under pressure, and guesses are rarely consistent. Alignment work makes these decisions explicit, which reduces risk simply by removing ambiguity. Once vocabulary and roles are clear, the next step is mapping shared processing activities, because risk and controls must follow actual data flows. Shared processing activities include data transfers, shared access to systems, data migration projects, shared analytics, shared support functions, and shared vendors. The key is to identify which activities will happen immediately, which will happen later, and which will never happen because they are not permitted or not needed. A common beginner misunderstanding is thinking that the only risky moment is the final migration of a database, but in reality, risk often appears earlier through temporary workarounds. Teams might export data to compare customer lists, merge marketing platforms to reduce cost, or grant temporary access to engineers so they can troubleshoot integration issues. Those temporary moves can become permanent if they are not governed. Operational alignment means each shared activity has a defined purpose, defined scope, defined safeguards, and an owner accountable for keeping it within bounds. Controls must then be aligned across the parties in a way that matches the shared activities, and the alignment should prioritize the controls that prevent the most harm. Access control is one of the most important because integration often triggers broad requests for visibility across organizations. A mature approach limits access to what is needed, ties access to defined roles, and ensures access is time-bounded when it is meant to be temporary. Logging and monitoring should be aligned as well, because investigation depends on being able to trace who accessed what and when across systems that may use different logging conventions. Encryption practices matter, but what often matters more is consistency, because a single unencrypted copy in a migration staging area can become the weakest link. Retention and deletion controls need special attention because integration tends to create new copies and separation tends to leave old copies behind. The goal is not perfect uniformity, but predictable behavior and clear evidence. Integration planning also needs alignment on data use and reuse boundaries because corporate change creates strong incentives to find new value in existing data. Teams may want to combine data sets to build richer profiles, to improve targeting, or to develop new analytics models. Those plans might be legal and appropriate, but they might also conflict with the original purposes, the original notices, and the preferences individuals expressed. Alignment means both parties agree on what reuse is allowed, what reuse requires review, and what reuse is prohibited. A subtle risk here is that one party may treat the other's data as newly acquired and therefore usable for anything, while the other party's commitments and contracts treat that data as restricted. Privacy management aligns expectations by tying reuse decisions to documented justifications, minimization requirements, and clear outcomes for individuals. If alignment is weak, you get reuse drift, where data starts being used in broader ways simply because it is now available. Vendor and third-party alignment is another area where integration and separation planning often fail quietly. Two parties may use different vendors for similar functions, and the combined organization may try to consolidate quickly to reduce cost and complexity. That consolidation can create privacy risk if the new vendor model changes data location, increases cross-border access, or introduces new subprocessors. It can also create risk if a vendor contract was written for one entity and does not clearly cover the other entity's processing. During separation, vendor risk often shows up as shared accounts, shared dashboards, or shared support channels that still expose data to the wrong entity after the split. Aligning controls across parties means aligning vendor management practices, including contract clauses, subprocessor oversight, incident reporting expectations, and data return or deletion procedures. The privacy manager's job is to make sure the vendor ecosystem changes in a controlled way, not in a rush that trades speed for uncertainty. A major part of alignment is planning for identity and access transitions, because identity is where organizational boundaries become real in technical terms. During integration, teams may want single sign-on, shared directories, and unified account provisioning, which can reduce friction but also expand reach. During separation, teams must ensure identities are disentangled, access is revoked, and shared authentication systems do not remain a backdoor into sensitive environments. A beginner misunderstanding is thinking access revocation is a one-time task, but in reality, access exists in many places: system accounts, vendor portals, application tokens, service accounts, and administrative tools. Alignment means deciding how access will be granted and removed, who owns the process, and how it will be verified. Verification matters because the worst separation failures often involve forgotten accounts that remain active for months. When you align identity processes, you reduce the risk of unauthorized continued access and make your separation plan credible. Data migration and system integration projects deserve special attention because they create temporary states where controls are often weaker than in steady operations. Staging environments, test datasets, conversion scripts, and troubleshooting exports can all create new copies of personal data. The risk is not only exposure, but also loss of control over retention, because temporary copies are rarely governed as carefully as production systems. Aligning controls means setting expectations for how migration data will be protected, who can access it, whether it will be minimized, and when it will be deleted. It also means aligning how teams handle errors, because errors often lead to copying more data than needed to diagnose problems. Privacy management can add value by insisting that migration plans include cleanup steps, not as a moral request, but as a defined deliverable with an owner and a date. When cleanup is designed into the plan, it is far more likely to happen, and the integration becomes safer without becoming slower. Another area that benefits from thoughtful alignment is incident response across parties, because integration and separation create unique incident scenarios. A breach might occur in a system owned by one party but affecting data from both parties, and the response must be coordinated in a way that avoids conflicting messages and missed deadlines. During separation, incidents may involve data that is shared under a transition arrangement, where responsibilities are split in unusual ways. Aligning incident response means agreeing on escalation paths, investigation roles, notification responsibilities, evidence sharing, and communication approvals before an incident occurs. It also means aligning definitions of severity and what constitutes a reportable event, because different organizations can have different thresholds. If those thresholds are not aligned, one party may treat an event as minor while the other sees it as major, and that mismatch creates delay and confusion. A privacy manager helps reduce chaos by ensuring incident response is planned as a joint capability, not as two separate playbooks that collide in the moment. The alignment work should also include a plan for training and practical guidance, because controls are only effective when people understand how to apply them during change. Integration introduces new tools and new workflows, and separation introduces restrictions that can feel unfamiliar to teams used to internal sharing. People need clear guidance on what data can be shared, how to share it safely, and what shortcuts are not acceptable. This is especially important for functions that handle personal data routinely, like customer support, sales operations, finance, and human resources, HR. Teams in information technology, IT, and engineering may need guidance on how to handle migration datasets and how to avoid putting production data into less controlled environments. The goal is not to overwhelm people with policy language, but to give them operational rules that match the new reality. When guidance is aligned and consistent across parties, you reduce the chance that people invent their own methods under pressure. As we close, aligning risks and controls across parties through integration and separation planning is really about making change safe by making it deliberate. You begin by aligning vocabulary and responsibilities so that obligations are owned and decisions are clear. You map shared processing activities so that data movement is intentional and governed rather than accidental and improvised. You align core controls like access management, logging, retention, deletion, and vendor oversight so that the weakest link does not define the outcome. You plan for identity transitions, migration safety, and joint incident response so that both integration and separation can withstand real-world stress. Finally, you support those controls with practical guidance that helps people work safely during a high-change period. When privacy management does this well, integration becomes faster in the long run because teams avoid rework and crisis, and separation becomes cleaner because access and data use do not linger beyond what is permitted. The most important outcome is that individuals' data remains protected even as the organizations around it change shape.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.